What's going on, guys? Welcome to this episode of Healthy-ish with Nutrishmish. Do I have an episode for you? This one is going to deliver, as they all do, but this one especially, I really enjoyed. So as you guys know, I do most of these episodes solo with one or two exceptions as of late, but I started this whole podcast because I wanted people to learn how to live their healthiest lives, and I have my little kind of corner in the sky of what I know, and I will continue doing a lot of solo episodes pertaining to nutrition and changing your eating habits and weight loss and all that kind of good stuff. But I don't know everything about health yet. I'm on my way to. So I wanted to invite more amazing, incredible people on because now with technology, we can do that so easily. So I had such a great conversation with Miss Stephanie Booth. She is a success coach and she really gets down to the nitty gritty of recognizing how we talk to ourselves and how that self talk could be impacting our mental health, how it could be holding us back from being successful and achieving the things we want to achieve. And these are all things that can be applied in a million areas in our lives. But I see it all the time in my work because a lot of the times, we feel like, if weight loss or nutrition or whatever, it's been a lifelong struggle for you, you're probably talking to yourself in a way that creates self sabotage. Or, for example, let's say you had planned on eating a certain way and you didn't follow through with that and you're like, oh my god, what is wrong with you? Like, we all talk to ourselves negatively, and from a weight loss journey, it could impact you positively or negatively how you're talking to yourself. From your career to your happiness, we talk about depression. We really covered a lot of things, and especially in the second half of this episode, she gives some really great takeaways and some really, really great exercises that she actually does with me. It's so interesting how she explains it, and I'm walking away with such a solid understanding of how the way that we talk to ourselves will dictate our success and our mental health and all of these things. So I am really excited to introduce to you guys Miss Stephanie Booth. Okay, so I have Stephanie here with us. Hey, Steph.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, of course. I'm so excited to have you on. So I want to kind of, first of all, before we get into like the juicy stuff, kind of just tell me about like your journey. Like, how did you get here? Because obviously, like when you were probably in kindergarten, they asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I doubt you were like, success coach. So how did you get to this place?
When I was in kindergarten, I most definitely told my kindergarten teacher I wanted to be a Barbie when I grew up. So there's that.
Well, listen, those ambitions are great. I'm all for being a Barbie. I kind of love
Well,
that.
she had it all. She had the cute clothes in the car. So I think I was onto something. Um, okay, so I grew up as a compliant child. I was known for being just a rule follower, really well behaved as a kid. I like never got in trouble. And that's what really defined me. And it wasn't until I had my son 3 years ago that I started, that saying, what got you here won't get you there. That
Yes.
became true in my life. Suddenly I realized that the way I had done life up until this point of me having to sustain a human, I realized something wasn't working anymore. And that's when it was around that time frame that I started my own personal growth journey. And I started realizing I had a problem with negative self-talk, with self-abandonment and self-betrayal, and that I used those things to motivate myself and to get myself to um, be appealing and enjoyable to other people. And suddenly I was running my own business and I was seeing that if I wanted to be successful, if I wanted to have a healthy, wealthy life that I really envisioned for myself, I couldn't always abandon myself. I couldn't betray myself all the time. I had to change something. And it was having my son that really started that change for me. And I started to kind of deconstruct all the ways that I had done life until that point. And it started with my inner mean girl voice. And then I started to rebuild some new habits, some new thought patterns, things like that. And all of this was just over the past few years. And it was my son's birth And I would also say it was entrepreneurship that really brought all of this to light, because I was no longer in the comfort zone of somebody handing me a paycheck, somebody providing for me my benefits
Yeah.
package or my retirement package. And suddenly that was all on me, and I had to learn to be at cause. And that was super uncomfortable because I had the only person in my corner was me and my bully. And so I had to make some major changes if I wanted to have the life I really desired.
Now, were you like very self-aware? Because I obviously speak to a lot of people who are trying to, or lose weight or eat healthier or whatever, and they don't even notice a lot of times how they speak to themselves, or that there is another way, or the way that they're doing it isn't like the right voice in their head. So were you always very like self-aware of your voice, or was it something that one day you were just like, oh, who's that bitch? Why is she talking to me like that?
I think it's the second one. So I'm actually trying to recall when I knew, but when it's your own voice, you don't really think about the fact that it sounds so mean. You just think that's the way it is. It's like
Right.
wearing a pair of glasses. It's the lens through which I saw life. I wasn't thinking about how my glasses made me see things. I was just thinking about the fact that I saw things. So suddenly I'm aware of these glasses. All I know is that there was a point in time when I recognized that the things that I said to myself, which were very unkind, I would never say to people I cared about. And I grew up with this kind of internalized belief from my religious upbringing that was very much um, that I shouldn't trust myself, that I couldn't trust myself. It was bad to trust myself. And so suddenly when I started hearing this mean voice and realizing I would never speak like that to anyone else ever, I wasn't sure what to do with that because I was left with the reality that I had to learn to love myself. And that didn't feel safe. So I have this specific memory. I was, so my husband and I used to run a photography business, and we were photographing a wedding, and we changed locations. We went from a bright outdoor location. We had just a few minutes to photograph another setting, and it was dark and indoors. And so I just went to work. I started photographing, and I had not changed my camera settings properly. And I saw it, and I realized like the last 5 minutes of work that I just did is all like, it's just all blown out. I can't see anything. It's all worthless. And I immediately thought to myself, Stephanie, you stupid idiot. And I said those, like, I caught it. And this is probably the first time I remember catching the inner mean girl. And right out loud, we're in this ballroom, and there's catering staff all around. There's this girl filling water glasses right next to me. And out loud, without even thinking, I was like, no holds barred in my approach. Out loud, I was like, Stephanie, you are not a stupid idiot. You are a hardworking woman, and you just made a mistake. And this girl is next to me, like pouring the water and staring at me. And I was like, overflow that cup. Because I was just suddenly talking to myself very motivated. That's the first time I remember actually recognizing this is a problem. And that's not the only way to see things. And it involved me talking it out loud, but I knew there was no other way for me to do things because I knew what I wanted. And in order to get there, I had to learn to be as kind to myself as I was to other people.
I love that. And it's so interesting how like I love that you just had this like outpour. You're like, Stephanie. That's amazing. But it's so true. And like I said, that's something that I see people struggle with so much. And I personally have such a hard time, explaining to people like, okay, how do you overcome this? Because it happens almost at this like subconscious level. So I think the first step for anybody is really just like understanding like, okay, well, what are the benefits of me speaking nicer to myself? So can you explain the correlation between mental health and how you speak to yourself?
Yeah, I sure can. So One of the byproducts of my negative self talk, and I think these things go hand in hand, it's a chicken and an egg. I don't know which comes first, but I was diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression. So one of the things that I used to motivate myself was just all this negative self talk. But really, the only result from that was severe anxiety, severe depression. And that does not motivate you to take action. It kept me personally very stuck, very frozen. And I was constantly engaging my panic response to get anything done. So for me, first of all, the impact of negative self talk was so, um, so deeply impactful that it really changed me at my core. And one of the first things I had to do was learn to be present with myself during a panic response. So, fight, freeze, flight, I would freeze all the time. And I knew it was an increasing problem that, like, wow, I've really gotten to this place where no matter what I do, as soon as I decide this is what I want and I start to take action toward that, that's when the negative self-talk starts in. And then I feel anxious, I feel overwhelmed, I feel a sense of doom, impending doom, and then I freeze. So that's kind of what the cycle looked like for me. And it was a real awakening moment for me when a few years ago we went to the beach. My son was just little, like learning how to walk, and he was obsessed with the beach and the water, and he was throwing a ball around and then like crawling around to get it. And he threw the ball in the water and he crawled after it and he fell into the water. And I saw him and I ran across the beach to get him. And then I don't know, I don't remember what happened. All I remember is somebody running in front of me, picking him up out of the water as he was out too far and he was drowning. And my husband, Steven, told me at that time, it was like you started running and then all of a sudden you were just standing on the beach staring at our son, and I was yelling at you to keep going and you couldn't keep going. So for me, negative self-talk and my experience with mental health issues, that all of those things going together was a significant problem, like really impacting my life. And as I learned to change that, I started to see that, first of all, it's weird to start to speak to yourself positively. I was literally just talking about this with a client. She was trying to love herself and be kind to herself. And as we were talking, I said, have you ever, like, if you were back in elementary school and you were on the playground and there's this bully on the playground and they were so mean to you all the time, and suddenly they're saying some of the things that you're saying to yourself. They're coming up to you and they're trying to be close to you and they're telling you you're wonderful and they're telling you that when you feel stressed out it's okay. How do you feel? And she's like, I would feel skeptical. Like, what do you want? Should I be
Hmm.
bracing myself?
Interesting.
Right? So that's the next phase that I went through in learning to create a loving relationship with myself. But as I did, it really unlocked a sense of hope for me. And it allowed me to stop feeling like I was physically bracing myself for every worst case scenario. I was able to relax and feel supported in my life and use my voice and speak up for myself in order to feel that sense of support I needed. And that helped really calm the anxiety, release depression, and helped me to start seeing that the desires I had for my life, my success, my health, my wealth, all of that was good and I was worthy of having it. So that really started to change everything in my life and my business and my relationships. And it's been a really good thing for me.
Amazing. That's so very insightful, and that, and like just having that very like poignant moment with, with your story with your son, and, just kind of like the whole journey. So, now if you don't mind me asking, were you ever somebody that was like clinically diagnosed with like depression and anxiety? And I'm sure this is not a blanket statement for everybody. I'm sure there are some people that need medication, but for some individuals out there, is it possible that just kind of changing the way that you speak to yourself, could that alone help somebody manage, maybe depression or anxiety? Of course, we're not saying everybody, but in certain instances, or maybe with yourself, did you notice that, it was almost self-inflicted?
Yeah. Yes, I was clinically diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression. And I think that the only way that you can really support yourself is if you trust yourself. So I really think that having that loving relationship with yourself is the starting point, because no matter what option I sought to support myself in this mental health experience that um, I was having, I would see it as shameful. I would see it as me trying to fix myself. So when I took that off the table and I chose to create a loving relationship with myself, that made every option a great option. So no matter what you do and what your experience is with mental health, when you start from a foundation of loving who you are, not who you wish you would be, you it opens up all the possibilities for you, because now you are in a resourceful state of mind. When you
Oh
start
my
from
God, I
love,
love that. I
right?
love that. Yes.
Otherwise, all you see are limitations instead of possibilities.
Oh my
So,
gosh, obsessed with that. That's such a great takeaway.
yeah.
It's so interesting how, when you really like look to solve the problems, and we're like, okay, maybe it's something that we're doing. Maybe we have a little bit more control than we think. And of course, that's not going to be the case for everybody, but, even if it's something where you can minimize the symptoms and just kind of, take it into your own hands. I love that. So, I know when we were chatting a little bit before, we talked about having personal ground rules. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah. So, going from a place of having such a negative, like hateful relationship with myself to having a loving, caring relationship with myself, that's not something you do by just with affirmations and saying, I love you so much. You're so awesome. Again, that you start feeling skeptical. It takes time. And for me, it's been a journey of being present with myself, learning to navigate how I'm feeling and do so in a loving and supportive way. So, one of the things I did for myself that was really, really valuable was I created a set of personal ground rules for myself. And these were, I wrote them down, and these were things that I abided by and I used to shape the way I talked with myself, interacted with myself, the way that I made decisions, the way that I approached results in my life. And it really started to change everything. And I really noticed that when I applied these ground rules, I started showing up as a leader in my life with confidence and self respect in ways that I previously had no clue how to access. So, if you have never created a set of personal ground rules, those are the benefits. They're incredible. You should do it. Absolutely. Do you want to talk about how specifically to do that?
Yeah, and if you don't mind sharing, what is your number one uh, ground rule for yourself that you feel like has made the biggest impact, if you don't mind sharing?
Oh, this is such a good question. Okay. My favorite ground rule for myself is no regrets. And here's what it sounds like. Here's what the kind of mental conversation sounds like. When I get a result, or when I do something in my life and I then am able to look back on it, hindsight is always 2020. Okay. So hindsight being 2020, it's easy, and this is a really common theme with people who struggle with their relationship with themselves, whether it's negative self-talk or self-betrayal or self-abandonment. It's easy to look back and regret and say, like, oh, if I only would have done X, Y, and Z, I would have gotten a better result.
Oh my God, I do that all the time.
Yeah, yeah, me too. So what I started recognizing was I was thinking those thoughts from the vantage point of having all the information, and that's not fair.
I
That's
mean,
n-
yeah, it would be great if we had all the information. That's correct.
exactly,
That's a really good point.
exactly. So what I started saying to myself was, well, that's not fair. You have all the facts now. You have all the information now. Of course, you feel like you should have done it this way. But at that time, I was doing the best I had with the resources I had, and I'm proud of myself. And
I
so I
love
would have
that.
this conversation every time, and then I would just take the regret off the table completely. So I'm a success coach. So this would come up if I launched something. I would launch a program, and whatever the results were, I would always look back, and my MO was always going to this sense of regret or sense of it could have been better. I should have done more, that kind of mentality. And the more I did that, the worse my results became. It was not motivating me at all. So as I stepped into like, okay, well, how do I love myself when I'm just really mad at myself? Creating the foundation of learning to trust myself, because I knew that if I could look at things in the past and say, I fully support what I did. I get to back my decisions because with all the information I had, I was doing the best I knew how to do. Then that means the things I'm currently making decisions on, I'm currently taking action on, I get to be my advocate right now. And I'm not, it always felt like making decisions and taking action in my life was like walking the plank. Like I'm doomed to failure. And when I took that piece out where I wasn't looking back and regretting and shaming and guilting myself, then I realized, like, oh, that was really the only reason taking action felt that way was because I was guilting myself. So that doesn't need to happen anymore. I'm at cause for that. I can change that. So that's the biggest one for me. That ground rule really changed a lot for me.
That's great. And like, is it a lot of mental work to be very aware of your kind of subconscious thoughts? Because I feel like that's the hardest. I'm just listening to what you're saying, and I'm like, to have the self awareness all day to be like, okay, this is what you said, this is what you have to say. That it seems like a lot of work. Like, how quickly does this kind of process take over? Because I guess you can argue it's probably more mental work to keep beating yourself up constantly. But like, how long does it take before this all kind of like seeps in? Because it sounds like it's not an affirmation, but you know, affirmations, just for example, do take a long time to believe. Everything you're saying, I feel like, is stronger than an affirmation because you know it's something where it's like it's logical, it's thought out. It's not like I'm great just because you're everything you're saying. There's a reason behind it. So how long do you feel like with yourself or working with clients does it take for all this stuff to kind of become second nature so that it's kind of playing on autopilot in the back of your head opposed to consciously? But before we get her answer, let's take a quick break. I need to tell you guys about this webinar that I am giving June 8th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You guys are not going to want to miss this. It's called How Weight Loss Works. We used to charge for it, but I think the information is so important that we are doing it for free live. Make sure that you sign up. The link is in the show notes. If you have ever struggled losing weight, keeping it off, it's because you don't truly understand how the whole thing works. Once you understand the rules, you can play the game. And by the end of this webinar, you are going to know all the secrets and the tricks and the tips that we give our clients so that they can become successful long term. You know, we don't judge success by weight loss, by weight kept off, and we focus all on habits. So if you're somebody who lives and dies by the scale, if you find yourself obsessed over weight, if you find yourself in the dieting cycle, you are not going to want to miss this webinar. It's going to be June 8th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't miss it. Sign up is in the show notes below.
Yeah. So our minds work in a really unique way. We have two parts of our minds, our conscious and our unconscious mind. Um, our conscious mind is the logical part of our mind. It's where we make decisions. It's where we accept or reject information. And we think that's the part of our mind that we use to make changes because we're consciously choosing to make a change, whether it's a dietary change, a health change, changing your routine somehow. We think we're doing that in our conscious mind, but that's all unconscious. Our unconscious mind accounts for 99.994% of our brain.
Mhm.
So our conscious mind is just making the accept or reject decisions, whereas our unconscious mind is actually running the whole system. So there's two ways to approach this kind of change. Way number one, and this is the way anyone can access. So this is the actionable part for you as a listener. You can do this using your conscious mind by having those mental conversations. And usually they say a thought habit takes anywhere from 21 to 66 days to fully form with daily dedication. So that's one way. And that's how I did it for a long time. The other thing that you can do is if you learn how to access your unconscious mind, you can actually go into your unconscious mind. You can uproot the old limiting beliefs, the old unresolved emotions, and some of the other blocks that are in our unconscious mind that are running these programs of self-hatred and self-abandonment. And you can uproot them and replace them with empowered truths and empowered learnings instead. All of that is in your unconscious mind. It's just a matter of learning how to access that. And that's some of the stuff I do specifically with my clients. It's amazing. That takes like 8 to 12 minutes on average. So
Oh, wow.
cool thing is you have options as to how you want to invest into changing that relationship with yourself. And if you want to do it yourself and money is more of the thing you want to save, then spend the time on rewiring your mind and having those daily, regular conversations where you redirect your thoughts and choose to be loving toward yourself. I think it's a combination of both. Like you still have to be self-aware. You still have to have boundaries with yourself, just like any other relationship. But then you also make it easier on yourself when you can by using that unconscious mind work too.
That's great. So if somebody's listening and they're like, okay, like everything that she's saying is resonating with me, I want to create personal ground rules for myself. Like, how do you know where to go with it? Where do you start? How do you know which ones are going to be really effective for you or which ones you really need? Like, what does that process look like?
Yeah. I think it's important that we make our personal ground rules based on a healthy, ideal relationship and not solving all the problems that we have. So that means start with identifying a healthy relationship that you have in your life and take a second and evaluate if you engaged in that healthy relationship the way you engage with yourself. What would that other person say or do, or how would they respond? And just let's transfer the context of your relationship with yourself to another relationship where that helps everything that you feel like is normal for yourself, that helps it all come to light. And it helps you see how harmful some of the ways that you're engaging with yourself can be. Once you start realizing, I would never treat another person like that. Okay, so that's the first thing. Then identify in that healthy relationship, what are some things that are givens and what are some things that are completely off limits? Okay, so maybe with this healthy relationship that you have, name calling is just like you can't even imagine a reality where you would name call. But you see that on maybe your list of things that you regularly do to yourself. Like I called myself a name in that moment when I caught it and redirected my thoughts. So maybe you recognize that one of the ways that you treat yourself absolutely wouldn't fly in this healthy relationship. And so you create, that would be your first boundary. And so ground rules are very simply personal boundaries with yourself. I believe that our boundaries with ourselves are the most important boundaries we have, not the boundaries we have with other people. Because our boundaries in our relationships with other people, they're really just reflecting our relationship with ourselves. So when we start inside, when we do the work internally and we set up boundaries and we say, like, name calling is off limits. Yelling at me is off limits. Making promises to me, when I make promises to myself and I don't follow through on them, that's off limits. Like, if you wouldn't tolerate it from somebody else, you make it off limits for yourself. And then it's daily doing the work of, okay, when you catch yourself in the act of negative self-talk or self-betrayal, what do you do now? And for me, that looks like, first of all, acknowledging, oh my gosh, I'm doing it right now. Like, I'm being super mean to myself. And then you can reframe it and then choose a different path of action. It's important that once you've acknowledged the thing that's wrong, that you choose the thing that you feel is right for you in that moment. So for me, it was learning to reframe my thoughts and then making everything that I wanted to do okay. It was okay that I wanted what I wanted. It was okay that I wanted to do the things I wanted to do. And I gave myself permission to do them because my inner mean girl made it so that I couldn't have the things I wanted typically. And I had to somehow prove that I was worth having the things that I wanted. And so it could be something as practical as if you've been holding yourself hostage by saying, like, you can't get that new workout outfit that you really want, that would make you feel really motivated and high vibe. You can't get that until you've lost 10 pounds or something like that. This is like an actual scenario I've had in my life. Giving yourself permission to go out and get it. And then choosing to work out from that high vibe energy instead of the low self-worth.
Interesting. Yeah. See, I see this playing out a lot of times with my clients who have, poor relationships with food where it's like, kind of similar to what you said, where they're like, you're not allowed to have this, or you could have this, when you're X amount of pounds down, or, when you're on a weight loss journey or a health journey, nothing in life is linear. There's ebbs and flows to it. So when people are on a downward, they're like, oh, you suck. And like, I use the example of like a boss. Like, so if a boss said to you, like, oh my God, like, Stephanie, what's wrong with you? Like, you did this wrong. Like, you're going to shut down or freeze, kind of like you were saying before. But if a boss is like, oh my gosh, don't worry, everyone makes this mistake, you'll totally get it. Like, you're going to be, coming from a place of empowerment. So, it's a really, sometimes they might be listening to this. They might be like, oh, well, this doesn't apply to me, or, what's the point in doing this? Like, but if you kind of think of it that way, like, oh my gosh, I would shut down if somebody talked to me this one way and I took to myself that one way. Maybe this is why there's a disconnect. So It's super interesting to kind of think about all that stuff.
Yeah.
Talk to me about limiting beliefs and how that impacts people, like how to get rid of them, because I feel like that's something, again, I specifically work with like people, on a health journey or a weight loss journey. And, there's a million limiting beliefs, but I find when people have that in one area of their life, it usually trickles on to others. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So limiting beliefs are very obviously beliefs that we have that limit us, but they're not easy for us to see, much like our relationship with ourselves and learning to be self-aware in how we talk to ourselves, how we treat ourselves. Limiting beliefs are not that easy to spot because they live in our unconscious mind. So what that means is our mind is anything that we feel and think on repeat Our mind is looking for patterns, and anything our unconscious mind sees that is a repeat thing, it makes into a pattern. So a belief is a part of a pattern. And so we'll have a limiting belief that makes us feel something, strong feelings, and think a set of thoughts. And our mind goes, okay, she seems to spend a lot of time here. We can automate that, free her up. She doesn't even have to think about it. It's kind of the same thing that's happening when we blink our eyes or remember to swallow. Like, you don't have to think about those things, right?
And
So
it's
then,
true that the brain, like, think, not to interrupt you, but I just want to make sure so it's because it's similar to, like, if my brain is watching a movie and I'm experiencing it with all the emotions as if it was actually happening. So your brain doesn't know the difference between, like, oh, this isn't true and this is true. It's just repeated with emotion and it becomes part of your autopilot system. And it's a similar thing, right?
yeah, absolutely. If you've ever heard about studies that they've done with Olympic swimmers who they had a test group that purely visualized successfully completing their race and winning the gold medal versus the group that actually went to the pool and practiced, the results were the same for
Wow.
visual versus your mind doesn't know the difference between perceived and real. It's what you focus on and the frequency of your focus, not whether it's good or bad. Your mind doesn't know. And it doesn't know if it's real or if you're just imagining it. That's why anxiety is so tough, because your mind is preparing for impending doom. So, limiting beliefs are in your unconscious mind, and they form by us thinking and feeling something specific on repeat. The key is the repetition. That's how your mind knows, okay, this is something we've just got to automate. Like, we've got to free up the calories to go elsewhere. We've got lots of things to do. That's what your unconscious mind is best at. After that, your limiting belief triggers a series of behaviors that you act out. You just don't think about it because you're going about your life all the time. If you start asking yourself, what am I doing and why am I doing this? What is this? What am I believing about myself? Then you're going to start to see what your biggest limiting beliefs are. So, becoming aware of, first of all, that you have limiting beliefs and that you might not know what they are, that's the first step. For me, one of the ones I had particularly about my health, when I started working on my health, I started recognizing that I had this limiting belief that no matter what a woman does, all women, just as they age, they just get more and more overweight. And that was this limiting belief I had. And I had no idea, but as I would take on different like dietary changes or fitness program changes, things like that, I would notice that I would feel very much like defeated just before I even started. And when
Interesting.
I
Yeah, because
asked
you were
myself,
setting yourself up to fail. That makes sense. You're like, I'm going to do all this stuff, but just to say I'm doing something, but I know it's not going to work for me. Even though logically, when you say that out loud, you're like, well, that's probably not true. But the autopilot playing in the back of your mind is assuming that it is true.
exactly. And so that always led to me self-sabotaging and me eating the things I wasn't planning to eat, or me missing the workout that I was dedicated to doing. And suddenly I'm right back where I started, and I would lose 10 pounds and gain 20 or something like that. That was like deeply frustrating. And I
And
started
then, like, you're actually getting that result. So you're like, see, like, what was the point anyway? So it's affirming it, like,
exactly.
on every level. It's wild.
Exactly. But here's the important thing to note. We don't prove our limiting beliefs to be true. Our limiting beliefs play out. So when you know you have a limiting belief, you're not working on like, well, I can't prove that that's not true, that that's true. What you want to recognize instead is everything in your life has naturally played out to prove that your limiting belief is real. And any evidence that says that it's not true, your mind just filters out completely. Like you don't even notice. So I
Wow.
was surrounded by women who were fit and over 40 or like postmenopausal, where I just thought that like all women just became overweight or obese later in life. I was surrounded by women who were leading a healthy lifestyle and were physically fit, and I literally couldn't see them because my focus was on this limiting belief. The limiting beliefs that we have determine what we see and hear and feel and notice in our world around us. Our mind filters anything that might contradict our limiting beliefs. So we feel like our results create our limiting beliefs when they're just proving the ones that are already there. So it's
that's like
important
when you like go to buy like a car, like a white car, and then all of a sudden all you see are white cars, or like, you know,
yeah.
like, so it's kind of like that. So whatever you're kind of, so it's interesting because you're like, and I bet, and it's not like you didn't see these women, like you saw them, but you probably were like, well, they're the weird exception to the rule. It's genetics. You
Yeah.
probably, I'm sure, had a way of like justifying like why it was the case for these like unicorn women, but it wouldn't happen for yourself.
Yes, 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 yes. I think that is exactly what my experience was, for sure. Yeah.
So then like, okay, so if I have somebody listening and they're like, oh my God, that's me, like I'm sure like this is what you do. So I'm sure it's a whole process, but like what would be kind of like a good place for somebody to start to disrupt or eliminate those limiting beliefs so that they could really be in a position of power to make change?
Yeah. Ooh, good question. You ask the best questions, by the way.
Thank you.
So good. Okay, so what I would start with is take a look at the results you have in your life currently. Things that, you know, you've completed. Maybe look at the three main categories are health, wealth, and relationships. And just look at those things. Like, do I like the numbers I see in my bank account? Do I like the how I feel in my body? Do I like how I show up in my relationships and how people treat me? Take note of those things. And if the answer is no in any one of those things, ask yourself the question, what was I believing that created this result? And just what you could try is open a journal and just write anything that naturally comes to mind. Trust it, even if you don't fully understand it. Just write it down. Just kind of brain dump anything that comes to mind when this comes up. And then you could ask yourself, is this mine or is this a belief that was passed on to me? So often our beliefs are things that we've perpetuated from previous generations. A really good example is the example of, if you've ever heard a parent say, clean your plate.
Oh, God, number one pet peeve.
Yeah. I grew up hearing that all the time. And when I started studying the mind, I started recognizing that the idea of cleaning my plate, like, first of all, I don't need to clean my plate. The problem was not me getting enough food. There was always an abundance of food in my life. So that advice was like bad advice, but why? Where did it come from?
Depression.
And I traced it back. It was from the Great Depression. So this was a borrowed belief that if you didn't clean your plate, there wouldn't be enough food. That was from 2 generations back. And sometimes that's where our limiting beliefs, they're not ours. So the easy thing is, you don't have to believe
all
it
of our
anymore.
all of our grandkids are going to be like, buy more toilet paper.
Yes.
They're going to have that weird limiting belief that they are constantly going to run out of toilet paper.
Oh my word, that is so true. Yes. Yeah. But you can just become aware of them. You can find out where they came from, and then you can choose what you want to believe instead. And I think that's the important thing. What is it you want to believe instead?
Yeah. So if you're not quite sure the origin, because like some things are obviously like your parents. So like, let's just use a weird example. Let's just say like, okay, let's say money, right? So let's just say, because I always find there's money food correlation. So I always like to use that just as a parallel. So if I'm like, okay, I, can never see past this certain number in my bank account, like no matter what I do. Like, is that coming from like my parents and my belief, you think? Or is it sometimes like another source that it came from? Or is it based on my experiences or how I think about myself? Like, how do you start to like unpack that?
Yeah, well,
When it's not
remember,
that obvious.
all of your experiences are really just going to validate the limiting beliefs. They can't do anything else. Your mind will filter out anything. So it's not that the
Oh,
experiences,
interesting. Yeah.
right? The experiences don't come first. The beliefs come first. So
Interesting.
what you can do is to know if this is a belief that is yours or if it's been passed on. This is a little unconscious mind technique that I'll leave you guys with. This is safe for you to do on your own. So this feels good to share. So in order to figure out if this is your limiting belief or somebody else's, I want you to remember that your unconscious mind records everything in your life. Everything. Whether you can consciously remember it or not, it's stored. It's filed away in your unconscious mind, and if you need it, it's there. So there was a study done that they put this couple in the middle of a crowded restaurant, and there were tables all around them, wait staff. It was completely packed, and they recorded the whole restaurant, and they recorded the couple and everything. And afterward, they did two kinds of interviews with the couple. They did an interview where they asked them, tell us everything you remember about dinner. And it was hard for them to even remember what they ate. They were like, wait a minute, what did I wear? I don't know. Right? And then they started asking, okay, what did you wear? What did you eat? What did you guys talk about? And they were just really at a loss. They were like, I think we might have talked about this and this, but it was pretty patchy. And then they asked, what did the people around you talk about? And they were like, I have no idea. And then they did some hypnosis on them, which hypnosis unlocks your unconscious mind. And they asked them the same questions. And those same two people had 100% recall of not just their personal experience, what they wore, exactly what they ate, when they ate it, what they talked about, the complete timeline of what they talked about. This is the part that gives me goosebumps. They were able to recall every single conversation in full from every single table around them. Your unconscious
Stop.
is recording everything, and it's taking care of you. It knows where things came from. It's got it.
That's wild. My goodness.
Isn't that crazy? So
yeah, wow. I had no idea that it would pick up conversations that you're not even consciously listening to. That's crazy.
Well, you can take in 2.3 million bits per second of sensory information. So seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching. You can only be consciously aware of that 2.3 million. You can only consciously be aware of 126 of those bits.
Okay, yeah, that's a discrepancy.
Major discrepancy. All of the, 2.2 million bits every second goes directly into your unconscious mind. It deletes, distorts, and generalizes anything that is not a part of that 126 bits. So how does it choose? Your beliefs. It filters everything, and it pops into your awareness. It's matching the sensory input to go along with your belief system. So if you believe that you can never have what you want, then you get on a podcast interview and your dog starts barking, and you immediately feel this confirmation of oh, I'm always going to be unsuccessful.
But if that wasn't your belief system, you might not even hear the dog barking.
Right. It filters it out. You don't pay attention.
Wild.
Isn't that crazy?
Wait, so what do you do? So when you're working with a client, do you kind of teach them to hand pick the things that they want their brains to pick up on?
Yes.
I might be giving you a call later. Geez, that's crazy.
I know.
So explain that process so people can understand what you do.
Okay, so this is where I think you guys can start. And this is the tip I wanted to leave with you. Here's how you can practice listening to your unconscious mind. Have you ever played a game where you do word associations, where somebody says, okay, so I'm going to say a word. Here, let's do this, just the two of us on this interview.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm
Michelle, I'm going to say a
I have the
word.
weirdest ones. Okay, don't judge me. Go ahead.
I want you to say the immediate first thing that comes up. Don't think about it at all. Okay?
Okay.
Do you think you can do that? Okay.
Yes.
I won't embarrass you.
No, it's
Peanut.
fine. You can.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Peanut butter.
Almond butter.
Okay. Door.
Handle.
Okay. Fitness.
Thin.
Okay. So those are the associations that your unconscious mind brought up. Okay. We have the same thing with our limiting beliefs. So what you can do is you can ask yourself a question when you know, okay, clean my plate. Where did that belief come from? You can ask your unconscious mind. And then what you do is you ask the question and you just wait and trust the first thing that comes up. It feels like something just kind of floats to the surface. It's often really, really fast, like in a split second. Trust that. That's your answer. That's your unconscious mind. Our problem isn't that we don't know how to access our unconscious mind. It's just that we've gotten used to not listening to it. And so we try to logic our way out of things. It's
almost like a muscle that you have to exercise, and knowing that you know that, I think, is important, because like I was just thinking, I was like, wow, like the last one, like fitness and thin, I was like, wow, like that's not even something I would normally say. But then I'm like, oh, but maybe when I was like younger, I kind of had that like perception of like whatever. So it's so interesting to like think about that. So you kind of say what limiting belief is, you ask your mind, like, where did that come from? And then just like sit with it for a minute and then just strengthen that muscle to like pay attention to see what comes up. And then that kind of helps shape it for you. So it's not that you're wrong and it's not that you can't do it. It's just that that's a weak muscle that we need to exercise, is listening to that voice to know where these things come from.
Yeah. And you can you can even ask yourself, I would start by asking it as a yes or no question. So is this my belief, or is this my belief? Yes or no. And yes or no is easy for that to kind of pop up in our mind. No. Okay. Is this from somebody else? Did I get this? Was this passed on to me? Yes. You'll be able to hear that a lot easier than another response, because our unconscious mind is representative. It represents things. It's symbolic. So it might show you a picture as an answer if you don't have a yes or no question. Or it might play a sound for you or something like that, or bring up a feeling, and you might not know what that means. So start with yes or no questions. I think that's going to make it easiest on you if you're trying this out on your own.
That's a great piece of advice. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Stephanie, thank you so much. I love all the things that you said, and I think it's going to help a lot of people, because I don't think people understand how much the way that their brain works and plays programs. And I don't think people understand their way is different than somebody else's way. And I also don't think people understand how much it could help or hinder them, and to like hone and be able to like exercise that muscle, like how much power that could give somebody. And you're such a great example of that, because you said you only started this a couple of years ago and you're like blowing up. So, yes. That's just the power of positive thinking, and, I don't want to say curing yourself of depression, but giving yourself the ability to manage it on your own. It's super powerful. So where can people find you?
I would say the easiest thing to do is head over to my Instagram. My handle is @TheStephanieBooth, BOOTH.
We'll have it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'm active there. If you love learning and reading, I have some incredible blog posts on my website. My website is breakthroughmethod.co. And you can check out my blog. I have videos, blog posts, all kinds of stuff there if you are really enjoying the mindset topics that we've been talking about today.
Amazing. And we will put all of that in the show notes so people can check it out. Stephanie, thank you so much. This was such a great interview. I'm so excited to put this one out into the world. I think it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Wow, what a powerful episode. Like, I have so many great takeaways from this, and I know for myself, I'm going to be paying very close attention to the way that I talk to myself and any limiting beliefs that I have, and I'm definitely going to start creating some personal boundary rules. I kind of love that idea. So, what are you going to be doing? Make sure that you take a screenshot of this and tag me in it on Instagram @NutrishMish. Tell me which part of the episode was your favorite. Please subscribe, rate, and review 5 stars, just for fun, so we can keep doing fun things like this. And don't forget our Eat Right, Live Right program, guys, our signature program that put us on the map, that has helped thousands and thousands and thousands of people lose weight and keep it off, is now available online for everybody. You get one-on-one coaching with one of our incredible nutritionistas. This program's framework is designed to help you find your own nutrition philosophy. So by the time that you're done, eating well comes just as naturally as showering and brushing your teeth. Make sure that you check it out at nutrishmish.com. Just click the link on the top that says work with us, and everything you can find in the show notes below. Catch you guys next week.